Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking about the evidence number two of geocultural challenges of globalization. More specifically, we're going to be talking about systemic racism. We're going to say what it is, where it comes from, and what we can do about it. So, first things first, I think it is important to understand the difference between normal or regular racism and systemic racism. Now, while racism can be attributed to a singular individual, systemic racism has more to do with the whole system. So we can define racism and we can attribute it to a person and say that the person is racist. This is to say that they have some prejudice or that they have some time of they're kind of antagonizing someone based purely on their race or the ethnic group that they belong to. While systemic racism has more to do with the effects that maybe this type of racism had in the past that have been implemented in the whole system that we live in. This now makes it so that a person of color has uh, a lot more trouble trying to get jobs, trying to get a higher education, etc., all due to the racism that happened in the past. So, to understand this problem, we can set an example. Let's say we have a black teenager and a white teenager. Now, there's a higher probability that the white teenager is going to be in a very better economic situation. This is not to say that every single white teenager has a better economic situation than every black teenager, but if we take the average, we can see that there's a higher probability that the white teenager is going to have a better economic situation. This economic situation can be based on a lot of things, but for a person, in this case, a black teenager, that has suffered from systemic racism, there are a lot of reasons which we're going to explain that lead to having a worse economic situation, which means that they are going to have a higher trouble, for example, getting into a better school, which will mean that they have a lot more trouble getting some better education, which means having more trouble getting a job. And there is also systemic racism that is trying to prevent them from getting this job, which we're going to discuss in a minute. So now that we understand the difference, let's talk about why is there systemic racism. So as I described previously, systemic racism has been created from the very beginning of slavery. So even though a couple hundred years ago slavery was abolished, the effects of slavery are still present today. When slavery was just abolished, we did have free black people, but we also had a lot of segregation and a lot of racism, which made it so it was harder to get a better job. More importantly, it was harder to get loans and harder to get property. This means that black people had a harder time trying to get a good economic situation, which then would translate to having a harder time passing wealth down to the descendants that they have. This problem has continued, which means that a person that has black ancestors has a higher probability of having a lower income or having a worse economic situation due to not having more opportunities as someone that is, for example, white, which had a better economic situation, had access to better education, better tutors, better jobs, etc. So now that we understand the reason why systematic racism exists, we can see at we can look at some numbers. So, for example, we can see this study that was directed by Harvard University, in which they took the same resume with the same type of information in it, and then they send it to a lot of companies using white-sounding names and black-sounding names. We can see that the result of the study is rather amazing or rather interesting. We can see that the white-sounding names got a interview request of about 24%, while black resumes had a interview request of about only 13%. So we can see that this is almost double the amount for white people than it is for black people. Now, also we can see how the American wealth is distributed, or the main pieces of it at least, um, on different sections of population. In this case, we can see that 85 of the American wealth is on white families, while only 4.4 for black families, even though black families do not make up only 4.4% of the American population. So now that we understand some numbers that can back up our claims, and we also understand where it came from, what can we do about it? So now, uh, as I described when I was talking about the difference between racism and systemic racism, there is not a singular person that we can point to and solve it. It is a problem with the whole system. So, systemic problems require systemic solutions. This means that we need to make a change that is systemic, and luckily we are part of that system. So, something that we can do is realize this type of problems, and we can work on them on our own, trying to find some prejudice that we have, trying to find different corporations which are being racist towards individuals, and try to start working on them, trying to change the whole system one person at a time. The idea is to change small things which can become can start to escalate, being able then to change the whole system one piece at a time. So that was my presentation. Thanks for watching.